JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. You've either seen it or you're not crazy. Either way, it is one of the most recognized pieces of media in fiction itself. Whether it be the memes, the over-the-top poses, or just the overall feel, we can all agree it comes together to make probably one of the best and most detailed stories ever told. And that's all because of Araki's amazing writing. Today, I want to talk about the invisible negatives and positives written throughout the background themes of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that help to explain the bizarre nature of it all. First, let's talk about part 1. In case you don't know, this part focuses on our first main Joestar, Jonathan Joestar, and his story fighting his stepbrother Dio Brando. Dio torments Jonathan and does everything he can to ruin his life, even going as far as rejecting his humanity to become a vampire. As most of us know, Jonathan dies, burning, while holding his brother Dio's severed head in his arms. He sacrifices himself to save his wife and child and the future generations of the bloodline. But what's interesting to me is Hirohiko Araki's own take on Jonathan's death and the reasons behind it. In Araki's novel, Manga in Theory and Practice, The Craft of Creating Manga, he says that he wrote Jonathan to be a hero facing the negative. The negative is embodied in Dio. He was designed to push Jonathan into a constant hardship, forcing him to feel like he's always losing. That persistent struggle is what Araki defines as the negative. He states, as a starting point, we're on the negative side. But if the negatives continue, if he tries and tries and tries and never succeeds, would you want to keep reading something so depressing? No. What people want is a positive story, where a loser triumphs over a bad situation to become a national champion. To me, these quotes show that Araki understood how to balance the positives and negatives in his storytelling, but he chose to take a risk by giving Jonathan a mostly negative arc instead. He goes on to later say, if the protagonist's arc must remain positive, then it stands to reason that no matter what else happens, the protagonist must win at the end. A happy ending is the very foundation of the Golden Way. That said, depending on one's philosophy, that rule can be bent. When Jonathan dies in order to save his beloved wife and child at the end of JoJo's first story arc, that is a bending of the always stay positive rule. Killing off the protagonist is about as negative as a negative can be and is unthinkable in a shonen manga. This quote shows how intentional Araki was with Jonathan's arc, emphasizing the emotional weight of his death. If we look at the future Joestars, we can see these negative and positive arcs in action. Joseph begins in a rough spot with Speedwagon's kidnapping, but ends somewhere close to a neutral. Jotaro deals with his mother's illness early on, putting him into an early negative, but he rises from there after meeting the Stardust Crusaders and defeating Dio. Josuke starts on a pretty positive flow, dips into some conflict within Kira, but then finds his way back. Giorno starts at a pretty negative spot with the boss and the mafia, but after defeating the boss, he ends on a pretty positive note. Jolene starts at a negative, being imprisoned, and arguably reaches a sort of positive within the new Irene-verse after Emporio stops Pucci. Johnny starts at a very low point in his life in a high negative, but after meeting Gyro, learning the spin, and defeating Funny Valentine, he ends on a pretty positive note. Josuke Part 8, or Gappy, starts at a negative, being completely lost as to who and what he is, but works towards a positive after defeating Toro and learning where he came from. Every Joestar has faced a flow of negative and positive energy, except Jonathan has really only faced a negative. The dramatic change from Jonathan's negative ending to the future Joestar's mostly positive flows parallel directly to his own death. By sacrificing himself into the negative energy, he allowed the positive flow to carry out into the future bloodline. Joseph, specifically, can seen almost as the embodiment of the positive energy that was produced, given his comedical character versus Jonathan's uptight, serious nature. Araki later says, "If you gamble by taking on that extreme negative, you must do so with the understanding of the rule of positives and negatives, and you must be looking ahead to how you will convert it into being a positive." In JoJo, Jonathan's son, Joseph, was the positive that enabled me to take that risk. Here, we can see that Joseph is really meant to be the start of a positive flow after Jonathan's sacrifice, being the only reason Araki was able to give Jonathan such a negative ending. Throughout parts 1 through 6 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the heavy theme is the flow of fate, and in parts 7 through 9, the theme is the flow of energy and fortune, negatively and positively. Specifically, in Steel Ball Run, the main antagonist, Funny Valentine's whole ideal focuses around creating a better America, one with immense happiness. He uses his further developed stand, D4C Love Train, to redirect unfortunate effects, or what he calls misfortune, and only allowing in fortune to the country. Valentine's phrase, "taking the napkin first," symbolizes the flow of positive fortune towards him. Being the first to take it shows his dominance and belief that he deserves power over everyone else. In JoJolion, equivalent exchange acts as a trade, something negative in exchange for something positive with an equal value. The Lokakaka fruit and walleyes allow this trade to be carried out. For example, Josuke Higashikata, or Gappy, is a human created from the combination and exchange between two people. He is both Josefumi Kujo and Yoshikage Kira. While Kira was close to death, Josefumi fed him a Lokakaka fruit, combining their bodies together to be reborn as Josuke. Equivalent exchange took the negative, Kira's dying body, and combined it with the positive, Josefumi's living parts, to create Josuke. Equivalent exchange also mirrors Jonathan's death, because he traded his life to ensure a positive future for the Joestar bloodline. The equivalent exchange can also be seen similarly to karma, sort of how we see Johnny Joestar die in JoJolion, by exchanging his life in return for his son, not by an equivalent exchange, but as an exchange of karma. But of course, we can't talk about flow of energies without talking about
Wonder of You.
I am wonder of you. The flow of things will always lead to calamity. In case you don't know, Wonder of You is a stand that allows the user to manipulate the flow of calamity to affect anyone that pursues them. Calamity is said to be the invisible flow of energy throughout the world. It is all things negative. Norisuke says that there is a natural law in the world, one of flow, otherwise known as a natural path in life. Wonder of You simply manipulates this natural flow of calamity in order to attack a specific person. This flow of calamity is a constant, natural force of negativity. It brings misfortune regardless of someone's choices, emotions, or actions. Yasuho later explains Wonder of You as a natural law of calamity. Even without a user to control it, will the hospital director still not disappear? The calamity, it's still going. Or rather, the laws of calamity are just things that exist in this world that can never go away, and Wonder of You was just an ability that allowed Toru to use that for his own ends. Wonder of You later says, "The act of pursuing me is certain to become a severe disaster that is sent back to the attacker. That is because the flow of calamity is the flow of reason. The logic of this world is linked together in a continuous chain. To overcome that and reach me is not possible. These forces are a natural law within the JoJo's universe, and the flow of negative and positive forces build them all." Next, I want to talk about mechanisms, which were a force that were introduced in the JoJo lands. Currently, we don't know much of how this force works, except for the fact that the lava rock is one of these mechanisms, and it has the ability to bring things of value back to it by controlling a flow of energy and fate. They're said to be a natural force in the world that controls the transformation and direction of wealth, security, power, etc., and how they are transferred. JoJo states that mechanisms have power, but they're invisible to the eyes, and says that mechanisms are a apex, the strongest of energies, one that controls the entire ecosystem. Going back to the original continuity of JoJo's, otherwise known as parts 1 through 6, we can see Araki's use of fate. This predetermined negative energy is seen throughout every Joestar and even the villains. Pucci, for example, says, "To be reborn is to be chosen, and the chosen one, even in his struggle against the others, is merely being pushed upwards and even protected by the fighting figures beneath it. The people who are drawn to me through fate, they exist only to push me upwards towards my goal, attaining heaven. If Jolene Kujo has truly escaped from prison and is heading towards me, she will merely become another existence that I will have to step over." Even Pucci, who thought he would win because of his beliefs in destiny, was met with his own fate. Emporio says to Pucci in his final moments, "You lost to fate. Walking the path of justice is true fate." This shows that Pucci's idea of destiny was just his own belief. His actual fate, his defeat, had already been written into the bigger picture. But it is possible to act against this fate and win, as seen by many of the Joestars. To name a few, Jotaro was able to defy his fate by stopping time when he should have died during Dio's time stop. Giorno was able to rewrite his destiny with the power of GER, GER being able to reset misfortune, restoring a positive flow of energy. And Jolene's death, while falling into fate, acted as a sacrifice to reset the universe, allowing the Joestars to be free from their negative fate. Finally, I want to talk about some real-life connections to these laws in JoJo's. Stoicism, in simple phrasing, is the philosophy to live with and in accordance to nature, including fortune, fate, and providence, or divine reason, and acceptance that the only thing you can control is your own reaction and response to it. Jonathan, for an example, is a stoic. He stays composed through pain, accepts his losses, and dies not resisting, but looking forward towards the future with peace. Giorno is faced with many unfair, overwhelming situations that would seem impossible. But instead of running away, he calculates, plans, and follows the hand fate dealt him, besting his enemies by accepting and creating a response. Many of the fights in JoJo's cause the protagonist to fight with their heads and not their brawns. They must accept the fight they were given and think with their heads on a way to push past this flowing force of energy. In a more direct way, symbols are used in JoJo's, like the tarot cards. They're used for reflection of oneself, guidance, understanding of one's path in life, the connection right back to acceptance of fate, and flow of energy. These uses of positive and negative energy and fate throughout JoJo's Bizarre Adventure helps to build a natural rule throughout the parts that act upon everything. It builds the worlds, the characters, and even the stand abilities. They're not only a part of Araki's writing style, but also what separates him from other mangakas. These energy systems connect through everything in JoJo's. Every stand ability, every fight, every character, they all are dealt through fate and have negative and positive energy throughout them. And Araki's use of this really helps tie everything down into a more understandable world. Well, thanks for watching. I know it's kind of a ramble, but I enjoyed making this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching it and maybe even learned something about JoJo's. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking or subscribing and commenting what you think. Did I think too much into it, or are these fates really visible throughout the entire series? And let me know if you want to see more of these kind of videos, because, like I said, I really enjoy making them, and it's very different and very fun for me.